Hi, I'm Kirk Chugg.
And I'm Cory Moore.
We are the Gentleman Project podcast. We are friends who are passionate about fatherhood and raising the next generation of great kids.
The more Kirk and I talked about being better fathers and raising gentlemen, the more we wanted to share it with the world and learn about what other fathers are doing to make their interaction with their kids even better.
Yeah, we've had these conversations for years now, and we thought it was time we record them. I hope you enjoy the podcast, everybody.
Kirk, today we have Randy Garn on the podcast, New York Times bestselling author and good friend.
He's a well-connected guy, but he has found an amazing way to structure life around his family, and I'm excited to learn from him today. Enjoy the podcast, everybody. Welcome to the podcast today. Randy Garn has been a friend of ours for a long time. We've run in a lot of the same circles, know a lot of the same people, but I'm always impressed with Randy. Cory, he's got more energy than anybody I know, and hoping he can bring some of that energy into our fatherhood game today. Randy, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be with you, fellas.
Randy, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do for a living, and maybe then a little bit about your family, just so we can give the listeners, a little background.
I love it, man. I literally am from a little town called Sugar City, Idaho, a sweet little place. And the reason why I love being on this podcast with you guys is that I'm trying to be like my dad. He literally is my hero. So I grew up, he was a high school football coach, and everybody who knows my dad loves my dad. But the reason why they love him is because he was tough. You knew where you stood, and he held everybody accountable, even myself. And so he really understood what it meant to not just be liked, to be very respected. And I think he did that with all of us kids as well. So I'm pumped to be here to just share some. I'm trying to become like the father, like my father.
Very cool, Randy. So Cory and I were talking before you got here to the studio and said, what's the one word that comes to your mind when you think of Randy Garn? And I had the word in my head already. And Cory, what'd you say?
High energy, baby.
He's got some high energy. You see him on the stage speaking, emceeing events. You take this for a motivational speaker or an MC, whatever you want to call it. It's always high energy. Okay. So Randy, my question for you today is, are your kids like that? I mean, you didn't go too far in your family, but I know a little bit about it. And guys, this guy has got his hands full, right? He and his wife have had 2 sets of twins in addition to other kids. You've got 6 total, right?
We have 6 total.
Yeah. And 2 sets of twins in there. So he knows high energy. How do you bring high energy into your household? How do you bring the positive attitude that we see everywhere Randy Garn goes? What's it like at home?
What's really super awesome is that my wife has consistent energy. There's different, you can have positive energy and it can be consistent. Like my wife's very grounded. She's a yoga ninja. We actually did yoga on Saturday. I'm like as flexible as a tree trunk. I'm like a cement post for real. But I think what keeps my energy high is a few things. It literally is a love for life. And I just think that being a father and being a dad and being a husband is that it's like, what kind of energy do you want to exude to your kids? I don't really yell. I don't really get upset. We have a thing when I was growing up, we called it the Garn Grumpies, because I got some Irish in me, so we get pretty fired up a little bit. But I try to manage my energy, and in a positive way. I think a lot of that comes with like, what kind of example are we setting for our kids? If you come in ticked off or like chucking stuff or yelling at your spouse or yelling at them, they never, ever forget that. But if you're excited every time you see them, you're like, Jack, Max, what's up, dude? Seriously, that was the worst soccer game we've ever had. But you know what? We have tomorrow. We got another day. And instead of like being, always throwing a wet blanket on stuff, I've actually kind of lived my life. And one of the companies that I'm a partner on is High Performance Institute with Brendan Burchard. And we teach high performing habits, and energy is number 2. Seek clarity is number 1. Having a lot of great energy, generating energy is number 2. And so I think as we think about fathers or leaders in our community, it's like, do people want to be around you? Do they want to be with you? Do your kids want to be with you? When you say, dude, guys, let's go fishing, they're like, dude, I don't want to go with dad. And I would say there's a lot of kids like that. My dad's always down. He's always blue. My dad wasn't. And so again, I'm trying to be that positive force for good energy around my wife, around my kids, around them. Do they want to be with me?
So you talked a little bit about your dad and your upbringing. Mm-hmm. Sounds like he was pretty important to you. Talk to us about some of the things you learned that you're passing on to your kids, maybe from your father or others in your life.
So one of my really good examples, when I was 17 years old and I was a junior in high school, and it was our final prom, and I went out with my friends. That prom was Saturday night, and I went out with my friends Friday. My dad's like, Randy, we got to move the cows on Saturday morning. And he said, I need you home at 11 o'clock. And I said, Dad, I'll be home at 11. He's like, you promised me you'll be home at 11. I said, yeah, Dad, I'll be here. He's like, hey, if you're not, because you messed up last weekend, he's like, if you're not, then you're not using the car for prom. And I said, Dad, I'll be home at 11. So I'm with my friends. We're having an awesome time. We're out. And all of a sudden I look at my watch and it is 11:17. I remember exactly. I'm like, oh, no, señora, parasita na perna torta. I am in trouble. So I'm cruising home. I get home and I sneak in and I open up the door and I sneak in my bedroom and I'm like, I made it. Dude, I made it home free. He's not awake because usually he's awake waiting for me. And I get in, I pull back the covers, and there's my dad sleeping in my bed. And he's like, what time is it? I'm like, Dad, it's 11:25 right now. He said, what time did you promise me and commit that you'd be home? I said 11. He's like, okay, well, I'm going to follow through with my commitment. You don't get the car. I'm like, Dad, are you kidding me? No, I'm going to follow through with it. But let's say prayers together. We said prayers together. He wasn't mad. He didn't get upset. But then guess what happened in the morning? I pop out of bed. I'm like, dude, he's going to let me take the car. Did he? No, he didn't. He actually stuck to his word in his commitment. He literally taught me how to be committed to my word and be impeccable with my word. And I think that's just a good example of how my dad was. He wasn't a jerk. He wasn't that. He taught accountability at the highest form.
I had a conversation with a friend the other day, and he kind of brought this up. He's like, I realized at some point I don't have to be the disciplinarian, and I don't have to come up with these creative consequences. You help your kid realize that they're making a commitment, and then at some point you just let those consequences be the teacher. Yeah. And you don't have to come up with these things and be the bad guy. You say, oh man, I'm sorry that you chose that. Now, the consequence for those actions is X, which we agreed upon before. I still love you. Let's move forward. And you can learn the consequences for actions, because that's the way the world teaches, right? When they leave when they're 18 and they go out and they do stupid stuff, they don't get those second chances of like dad saying, oh yeah, I'm so sorry that happened to you. Let's not do that next time, but right. Let's forget about it this time. The world doesn't do that. So I think we're doing our kids a big disservice if we do that. So great story. Thanks for sharing that, Randy. You've talked about your dad a lot on social media. I remember this picture that you post, I believe like on a Father's Day or birthday or something, of your mom and dad standing next to an old pickup up in Sugar City, Idaho. Yep. And it's just like this quintessential Americana fatherhood picture. And I love it because you keep it and you post it all the time and you talk about the example that your dad was to you. So I'm going to ask you a tough question because I know how you would answer this other question. Besides your dad, who's your fatherhood mentor?
Man, that's actually a really, really, really good question. I would actually, another really good fatherhood mentor for me would actually be a guy named Kevin Miyazaki. And he was actually my young men's leader. And then he became a church leader to me. His son, Clark Miyazaki, runs, I think, he did Skull Candy and then Stan Socks. And they're just an amazing, amazing family. But him and my dad, I'm sure they were colluded, dude, just tried to keep me out of trouble going, because I was not the easiest kid, dude. I did have a lot of energy as a kid. And so my mom always said, I'm not that tall. I'm probably 5'6", 210 pounds, biting Irishman. But I'm sure I had a lot of energy, and I'm sure Kevin and my dad were colluding together on how to just keep me out of trouble. But Kevin, one thing like Kevin did too, like I was awesome in scouting. And I had almost everything done when I was like 14 years old. And then I got into football and baseball and like everything. I remember Kevin called me on my 17th birthday on September 5th. My birthday, September 6th. And he's like, dude, you have 3 more merit badges to get your Eagle done. I'm like, what? He's like, your birthday's tomorrow. I'm like, are you freaking kidding me? I didn't think I was that close. And he's like, you're that close. Get over to my house now. We spent the whole day finalizing the last 3 things that need to be done. And you know what? He did it in such a kind, loving way. He came to my house and he got me. And I was like, for somebody other than my dad to really care about me that much. And then he was the vice president at the private college that I attended. I was a student body president there. And my whole life, I'm like, my gosh, this guy is such a loving, amazing, powerful force, wicked smart. I'm like, that's another great guy that was a great example to me.
That's a great story. I think we all have people in our lives like that we thank, and we hope to be those guys, right? We hope to be that for our kids, certainly, but even for others that we come in contact with. So for a living, you teach like these true north principles and, high performance habits. And that's kind of part of, it's just who you are, right, Randy? So you know all these principles, you know them in your heart, right? Because you teach them every day. How do you teach your kids those principles, and what principles are like most important to you with your kids?
It's honestly, it's not easy. You literally have to consciously think about it and do it, because our lives are so busy right now, and you can get just sucked in. I will tell you what I started doing about 4 years ago. Is I started taking Saturdays very serious as a family day. It's made a massive impact on my life and my kids' life. And so I will take my boys out on an adventure. And a lot of times it doesn't have to be big. It will be like, hey, we're going to do a project today. And I have my kids tell me what they want to do on Saturday. So I'll take my twin boys. I'll take my twin girls. I've got a 17-year-old that is just flipping awesome. Hallie's hilarious. And I've got a daughter right now that's serving right now in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, basically helping with, hurricanes that are happening and everything else. And so, but I consciously think about on Saturday and try to plan an activity with my kids that's going to be a teaching activity. And then I put my boys to bed every night. I look forward to putting my kids to bed as well, so that I can say prayers with them, or I can have a discussion with them. And I always ask them, what was one great thing that happened today, and what was something super, super hard? And I think we don't ask enough. Like, we never know if they were bullied. We don't know if they're dealing with stuff mentally. We don't know. So I always ask those 2 questions every night with my kids. Tell me one great thing that happened today, and tell me something that you did that was super, super hard. And I think just checking in with them, I think the statistic is that the average father spends about 7 minutes a day with his kids. And I think that was from several years ago, because you think about that, but I even think about myself, but that's is that 7 minutes of focus time? Are we putting our phones away? Are we literally looking them in the eye and saying, I care about you. Yes, I'm listening to you. I think 4 years ago, one of my daughters grabbed my face, and I was talking to her, and I was literally texting, and we had tons of stuff going on at work, and she grabbed my face and she's like, Dad, you're not there. And dude, it kind of shook me right to the core. And she's like, Dad, you're not there. And here she is, 7 years old. I'm not there. I'm not there, Jane. And I need to be there. So I think, consciously, I think for me, a couple things is that when I get home from work, I try to at least shut everything down from when I get home from 6 until I put them to bed. That is my sacred family time. And so I think actually setting boundaries is critical.
I'm really glad that you said it. It's hard.
Yeah.
Because I think it's hard for me.
Yeah.
That's the whole reason that I'm part of this Gentleman Project movement that Kirk started.
Yeah.
Because I thought to myself, I've got to do better.
Yeah.
How am I going to do better?
Yeah.
And the moments that you say, you look internally and you say, I need Saturdays to have a purposeful time with my kids, right? Or I need a purposeful moment at night where I ask them the questions you just said, right? What was the best and worst part of your day? Those are the things that can change our lives and can change our relationship with our kids. But I think too often we don't talk about how hard it is. We just say, oh yeah, I've got this and this and this and this that I do. Well, guess what? It's hard for everyone. Yeah. And that's why this podcast, so we can inspire each other to do it just a little bit better, right?
Yeah, one thing that I actually tried this today and was going to share this with you guys. So my youngest had a short day, and so I have to pick her up at a time that I got to stay downtown so that I'd be driving back and forth between elementary and junior high. So I'm like, let's just kill some time, right? And without saying anything, I take her. She's 9. I took her down and I just took her to lunch. Without saying anything, I just pulled in the parking lot. We went to a restaurant and sat down and had lunch together. And she was like, oh yes, I love these dates, and she's like, we've needed one of these, right? And then I said, what do you want to do next? And she says, let's go say hi to Oma. That's my grandma that passed away a couple years ago. Mm-hmm. She wanted to go walk the cemetery. So we went and we walked the cemetery, and she said, Dad, let's go find some veterans. Let's look for flags. And like all of these things that I've been teaching her, we just had like this one-on-one time, and it was totally out of the ordinary, right? And that was something that Derek Porter talked on the podcast a week or so ago. He said, do stuff out of the ordinary, create experiences that are outside the norm so that your kids go, wow, this is different, right? And it could be as simple as something like pulling in. I remember my dad would do this, and he'd pull into Arctic Circle when I was a kid. It's like, we didn't eat out a lot when I was a kid, but man, when we pulled into Arctic Circle, it was a treat, man. And I still remember that feeling. I'm like, oh yeah, Dad, all right, we're going to have a hamburger tonight. And creating those experiences, I think, is something I watched you, Randy, do that, and it's through the filter of social media. So take that for what it's worth, because social media can be and appear however you want it to. But I always see you like hunting and fishing and hiking with your kids and having these amazing times. So I know you're doing that stuff on purpose, because it doesn't just happen.
Right.
Talk to us about why you started to do that and the structure behind it. How do you make it happen in such a busy world and a busy life?
I mean, that's a big question. And it's one thing that I talk about quite a bit. I actually, when I speak to entrepreneurs and when I talk to CEOs, it's like, my whole thing is what's the home court advantage? If everything's not right at home, then nothing's right. And everything wasn't right at my home for a while. I had 3 businesses going on. I was, had a massive church calling, and I would say probably like 6 years ago, I looked at myself and I'm like, dude, I'm not happy. It looks like things are going awesome, and they were, like, literally things are going awesome professionally, but that's not what matters most. Literally, at the end of the day, we're not going to care about how many meetings we had or what we did. And so my wife is a saint, like literally. And what I call the home court advantage is like, my best friend is my wife. I'd literally rather hang out with her than anyone else. And then second to that, this is my posterity. Like, what is my legacy going to be? It's going to be the business I create and lives that I change that way and transform. But for me, the most important thing is, how are things in the 4 corners of my own home? And do we have peace at home? Do I have security there? Is there love there? And my wife always says, the way that you spell love is Time. And so I think for me, it's really what I started to do like 6 years ago. Just like, My family is the most important, and it will be until the day I die. And I need to make that a priority and a conscious priority in my life, because business will always be there, and I can always create stuff. But man, if I lose my family, I've seen too many friends and too many people be just devastated and rocked internally because they don't have the home court advantage.
Sounds like you had an aha moment at some time too. Like, I know that you've always been focused on your family, right?
Yeah.
But I've had those aha moments where I think to myself, am I really spending my time exactly the way I should? Or am I really connecting with my kids? Or is it getting away from me? And I think all of us have to look in the mirror often and say, okay, time out. What do I need to do different? Do you do that? Do you take timeouts? Do you have time where you meditate, where you take, a look at your life, and how do you go about doing that, and how often do you do it? Because I think that's part of what I'm hearing here.
Every night after I put my kids down, I will actually journal, and it's really kind of a, how productive was I today? And so I journal heavy, and I started doing that. So I will plan my whole entire day out the night before. So I wake up with the ground running, and I think it actually helps me with my energy. I know exactly what I'm going to do. I don't have any wasted motion. Every single second of my day, I'm going to squeeze the life. I'm going to squeeze the juice out of every drop of life that I can. And I actually learned that a ton from Brendan from High Performance Institute. It's just like, how do we maximize our time on this earth? But also, how do we make priorities? And so every night I'll know exactly what I'm doing. And then we plan out our weekends. A lot of times, I wasn't that successful at planning out weekends, but like this weekend, we're going to Goblin Valley, and we're going to go camp under the stars, and we're going to hike Wild Horse, route, and do a midnight hike and do mic games. And the kids are engaged and involved in that. And so you have to plan, you have to be serious about it. And I actually journal everything I'm going to do at work and everything I'm going to do at family, and I make it happen.
That's awesome. I want to ask kind of a follow-up question. And I come home many times from very stressful, focused, high energy days. And when I get home, I'm drained. Yeah. I'm done. And I just want to chill. Right. And we can't always do it. Sometimes that's great, and we chill with our kids. Right. But often I think to myself, did I really act the way I should have when I got home? Was I really engaged, or did I chill too much? Watch a television show, read a book, whatever, or same thing sometimes on the weekend. So I'm actually asking you, as one of my mentors and thought leaders that I know, is there any tricks to the trade of, hey, when I get home, and maybe it's this planning, right? I already planned to do something, so now I'm going to do it. Any tricks to that, high stress, drained moment where you go, okay, I'm going to re-engage again with my kids?
Dude, I'm the same, Cory. It is like I come home and I'm either off of business meetings and things went well, or they went fantastic. And my wife is amazing. She should be on this podcast about all us fellas are telling everybody how to do stuff. She's probably got it nailed down more than us.
Yeah. Maybe we should make that happen.
Let's do it. You guys would love Shar. She's something else, man. I used to come in and I was still on the phone sometimes, or I'd get home and I'd still have texts or emails that I have to do. She looked at me and she said, it would be better that you stayed at the office and finished everything and then came home fully engaged with the kids. Because when you come home and you're on the phone or you're focused on other things, what you're saying is you're not important to them. The most important thing is when you get home that you are pumped and excited to see your children. And they race right now. I'm like, dude, Dad's home. And I walk in pumped to see them. I didn't always do that, but I do that now. I'm like, and sometimes I'm like, dude, who's going to give me a hug first? And they're jumping over the couches and I'm shooting missiles at them. And, and there's even days that I'm not perfect. I'm not perfect now. I've still got tons of crap going on. I'll come home but now I remember every time I pull into the driveway, I will take a deep breath. And sometimes, I only live 5 minutes from my office now. And so I actually need to get everything done before I go. But I think that's critical as a father. When you get home, be pumped to see your wife, be pumped to see your kids. When you leave, be pumped that you're leaving. And it's like, it's those little moments, and sit down, dude, Jack, how was your day today? Sadie, what's going on today? And so that's actually been really important for me.
Yeah, I need to improve on that. I'm taking notes, because sometimes I'm stressed and I feel bad about it. So I really appreciate you saying that and kind of how you go about it.
So Randy, you're kind of known as the guy with relationships. You know a lot of people. You can say, hey, do you know Randy Garn? Oh yeah, I know Randy through somebody else. Or I know Randy, he knows this guy. And you've kind of made a business of connecting people. I got an email from you as I left for the podcast, and I was driving to the studio from the desk of Randy Garn.
You know, because I love you, bro.
I know. 6 steps to making connections, right? So I looked at this. I'm like, I'm going to bring this up on the podcast with Randy. One, I want to make sure you know what was in that email. One of them is understand that relationships are built on knowledge. How do you communicate the importance of relationships to your kids? Because they see their dad building relationships really for a living, right? Yeah. You wouldn't have work if you didn't have relationships.
Right, none of us would.
So how do you communicate the importance of relationships to your kids, number one? And number two, is there some type of a system that you show your kids and let them interact with these relationships that you've created to show them that?
You know, that's a great question. What's really fun is, like, my daughter that's now in Louisiana, I used to take her on business trips with me. And I actually had her speak on stage, you know, about some of she's going to write a book on psychology and mental health. She really struggled with depression when she was, 13, 14, 15. And now she wants to be a psychologist, and she's going to write a book on that. And so she got up and shared that with everyone. And I can't tell you how many parents came up and said, I can't believe you're bringing your kids here. So I think too, I am trying to engage and involve my kids in my life and my work and what I do and who I'm with. When I'm with important people, like when Brandon Steiner comes out from Steiner Sports, guess where he stays? He stays at my house. Like, I bring people, I built out a whole basement apartment literally just so I can have people, my business relationships, come and see how I do things at home. And Brandon's like, dude, Char's eggs are amazing. I mean, I don't know what you did with them, but they are fantastic. I love it.
So, can you do the next 3 sentences in a Brooklyn accent, please?
Yeah, forget about it. You better believe it, coach. So, but that's another thing that I do. I take my kids on work, but I actually will, and this isn't always, it's not always a good strategy when you do the home court advantage, because sometimes I do surprise attack Char, and she's like, oh, you have people coming tonight. Thanks for letting me know. So, and she'll tell you that too, but my home is a place where my business partners can come and literally see how I do things at home. I mean, we do family prayer every night, and I don't care, what religion you are or whatever, you're joining the Garns in the family prayer. And that's just what we do. So we don't have anything to hide. We invite my business partners into my world and into my house, and they can be like, dude, again, that's the home court advantage. Who could do that? I actually think it builds a ton of trust. Be like, all right, if we can handle stuff at home and there's love at home and you've got trust there, you're going to be able to have so much more trust at work and everything else.
Absolutely. I think some of the best relationships that I have in my life with other men are those men who I've had conversations with like this and talked about, hey man, I'm struggling as a dad right now. Like, how do you deal with this? It's amazing the trust that it creates between friends when they see the real, true you.
I want to go back to what your dad did with you, right? He said, hey, he didn't get like super upset or lose his temper, which I do. I wish I was more like your dad. My kids wish I was more like your dad. But, he basically taught you principles, taught you, if you do this, this will happen kind of a thing. Talk to us about some of the things you do with your kids. Have you kept that going? And how do you teach your kids those same principles your dad taught you?
Baden Powell said this. He said, never do for a young man what he can do for himself. And we went to, I took my kids, we do a father's and son's trip every year. So I just got back from Salmon, Idaho, and it's pretty rugged country. And I've got twin boys that are 8, and I'm teaching them how to fly fish. And my son, Max, I was like, okay, you can do this. Let's teach you how to do this, and he did everything by himself. I did help him tie on the fly, but he had actually got out there. He had waders on, everything. I'm talking 8 years old, and he cast it out there. He did everything. He let it go down the river, and all of a sudden a massive fish hit that thing, and he caught it, and he brought it in, and he did it. And I'm like, pull it, Jack. And I didn't touch it. I was like, okay. And he said to me, he's like, Dad, that was so amazing. I did everything by myself. And I think that's one of the things that my dad would teach us is like, dude, we can do hard things. Our kids can do harder things, and too many times we're helicopter parents and we jump in too soon, too fast, and do things too much. I'm telling you right now, I'm trying to make my kids tougher than hell, because they're going to go through battles in their life. Like, I don't know if one of my daughters is going to go through tough things with their kids or battle cancer, or who knows what my 6 kids are going to go through in their life. But you know what? I'm going to teach them that they can do it on their own. And I think as fathers and dads, that's what I'm trying to teach my kids is like, you can figure this out on your own. I'm here, and I'm trying to be a good leader for my kids to teach them how to figure out stuff on their own. And that's just an example of what my dad did for us that I'm passing on to them. So I can shoot a deer by myself and skin it. I can fish by myself. We're not going to go hungry. But at the same time, how about dealing with friends and dealing with issues? Are we teaching them how to deal with really tough situations? And so I think it's just as important that we're teaching them and not jumping in too fast. And it's okay to let our kids fail. It is totally, totally important for us to understand failure, but yet then have somebody there with you that's a good coach and that can build you up. So anyways, that's what I'm trying to do with my kids.
There's some awesome wisdom right there. I love that. I need to be better at that with my kids. Again, taking notes from the great Randy Garn.
So Randy, you're in the entrepreneur space, and you taught me, I believe, what the word entrepreneurship means. What, you got the definition handy?
I do. I know exactly. It's a French word,
yeah.
and I got this actually from my buddy Tyler Norton. Always used to just hammer this, is that the word entrepreneur means to try. It means to try. It means to take risks. And we all are entrepreneurs in everything that we're doing. And dude, I've never been a dad before, and all of a sudden I've got a kid. And so it's just like, dude, I'm an entrepreneur father. I'm figuring this out as we're going along, right? And so I think there's ways that we can also teach our kids that it's okay to try. It's okay to do risks. And that's honestly probably why I love entrepreneurship, is that if somebody else can do it, I can do it.
Yeah, you kind of answered my question right there. You just talked about the stick-to-itiveness and the resiliency that we have to create in our kids. And in what better place in the economy can you find that than within the entrepreneurship realm of, try and fail. Yep. And if we don't teach our kids that it's okay to try and fail, nothing new gets created because everybody stays within that safe zone. So have you had any cool experiences with your kids as they've kind of seen you in the entrepreneur space where they're like, hey, Dad, I want to start a business, or where that's kind of rubbing off on them of, I think I could try something and might work, might not, but I want to try.
Oh yeah. My daughter Hallie wants to be an entrepreneur. She's actually going to be starting up a little snow cone shack or something. They're going to be doing some things. But just the other day, my 2 boys rallied 2 other boys in our neighborhood, and they went out and painted rocks, and they made like $80 selling rocks. I was like, guys, that is awesome. So they go out and they sell lemonade, they do things. And again, trying to teach them, I think the biggest thing is, how do we teach our kids how to be productive? and not let other people. My dad always say, like, if you don't have your own goals, somebody else will use you for theirs. And are we teaching our kids how to set goals? Are we teaching our kids the importance of hard work? Are we teaching our kids the importance of being productive? Are we not complaining in front of our kids? Are we showing, like, how we act, what we do speaks so loudly they'll never hear what we say. So you have to, as a father, the impressions and the imprints that we give to them, they will become like us. And then all of a sudden, when they become teenagers and things like that, if they can't come and talk to us, they'll find somebody else to talk to. If they don't feel that love, they're going to go somewhere else. And so I think that it's just so important that our kids also not just see us as a good coach and a mentor, but also as a friend. And it's a really fine balance.
Yeah, we were talking about that pre-show about the impressionable age of 11 to 14, I believe you quoted, of the most important time for them to be able to see and absorb by example. They're just sponges at that age, looking for some direction. And if we don't give them that positive direction in their life, they'll find another direction to go based on whatever gets their attention. So we've got to be, as dads, pretty prominent in their lives. Not everybody's living at home with their kids either. Sure. There's a lot of dads in tough situations that are, split homes or, joint custody situations where they don't have their kids all the time. What do you say to some of those dads that might not have a full-time family that they come home to every night and that they leave every morning? How did they make as big as an impact on their kids as what you talked about today?
I mean, and I have a lot of really close friends that are in that circumstance, that exact circumstance. And I think a really important thing is to get into a rhythm with your kids and to get in a habit with them. I think some of the same things that I'm saying, like when you're there with your kids, pay attention to them, especially if you have little time with them. Shut out everything else and just let them know that they're the most important thing in the world to you right then. And they will pick up on that. You'll be able to build that trust back up. If you've broken trust with your kids, it does take some time to build that back up, but you can do it. And honestly, I think my other thing in life is never be boring and never be predictable. Have tons of fun with them. Literally, they don't want to be told what to do every time. They don't want you to be, harping on them. Literally, sometimes laugh with them, have fun with them. Like we talked about, good energy with them. If you're a single dad and you only get your kids on weekends or whatever, go have a blast with them. I promise you that will make the most impact for them. They're just little kids. I mean, they're so malleable, and you want them to leave on a high, and then you want them to be like, I want to be with dad again. I can't wait to be with dad again. But if you're just harping on them, and if you're in a bad mood, and dude, I'm telling you, I'm not saying that it's not hard, because it is, but you have to consciously understand that what you do with your kids at that time when you're with them will make all the difference in the world on what kind of adult they become and what type of relationship you're going to have with them for the long term. Before
COVID, I traveled a lot. And I think you did too, Randy, quite a bit. Yeah. And so one of the things that I wanted to ask you, because you have experience with this, is when you are traveling so much, and maybe you can talk to how COVID's changed this, but when you are traveling more than you probably are now, any tricks to the trade about being a father on the road and about, interacting or building relationships with your kids, even though you're gone a lot? Thoughts on that?
Yeah. One of the things that is most important when you're on the road, I would still always FaceTime my kids. And technology, I mean, honestly, like COVID has changed the game in a big way. I mean, my daughter's in Louisiana, and I talked to her for an hour while I was on the treadmill this morning, and literally just had an amazing, amazing conversation with her over FaceTime. I think that you still, when you're traveling, you need to consciously set up times to either, I try to do it. I try to tuck them into bed at night and my wife gives them the phone, and we still say prayers together. We still read, books together. We'll still do things together. Even though I'm traveling, try to stay on the same, habit and same rhythm that you can. That'll make a big impact. But I also think, when I travel, and maybe this is this can be a good or a bad thing to do, but I'll always bring them something back. And so that they, whether it's a rock from somewhere, whether it's a cool t-shirt from somewhere, like I will always let them know I was thinking about them and I miss them. I will, whenever I travel, I bring back, and even if it's little, I will always bring my family back something.
Great words of wisdom, Randy. You've been a fantastic guest, and I think today we've all heard some stuff that we needed to, things that we can take and implement in our lives as fathers. It's been great to feel your energy in the studio today. I really appreciate you coming in and being a part of the Gentleman Project podcast. Randy, we really appreciate you.
Thanks, Randy. Great podcast from Randy. I hope you enjoyed it. Randy brought some amazing tips for us today. Kirk, what'd you think?
I loved it. I hope everybody likes and subscribes to the podcast to get next week's episode. This is a weekly podcast, so make sure you're tuning in. And if you like and subscribe, you'll get it downloaded automatically.